Welcome to the podcast, Tracey. I have been following your work on Instagram, on social media for quite a while. I don't know how I came across it. I think it was just searching for people who were into emotional anatomy as well. And we had the opportunity to chat, oh gosh, it was maybe 6 months ago. And I love seeing your work grow. So can you start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Oh, thanks, Jin. Yes, it was 6 months ago, actually. Um, my name's Tracey Stevens, and I'm an acupuncturist still, a practicing acupuncturist. But I think over the years, and I've grown in my understanding and just the depth of understanding that ancient wisdom has come through in terms of all the psychosomatic, the reasons why our bodies react in the way they do, and understanding the emotions behind disease and illness. And I think my interest in that has just grown and grown. And then I started off the Instagram about I can't remember now, about 2 years ago, thinking, I don't know if people are going to be interested in this sort of thing, and the way my mind works in terms of delving deeply into, why we have the things that come up and the illnesses that come up for us. And as I delved deeper and started writing more and more, it sort of gained momentum as people found my posts really interesting, and I thought, oh, I'm not the only one out there looking at all that sort of stuff. And it's something that's come naturally to me anyway, because of doing the energetic work. That we've always been taught to look at the whole person and the energy of the person and the emotional context in which illnesses and disease arise. And I think I just have been taking it one step deeper, because I always wondered, well, why? So, why is that person got this even this Chinese medicine diagnosis? What has created that in the first place? And so I've just delved and delved.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I don't know the history of Chinese medicine, like how many thousands of years old it is, but there is a lot of these Eastern medicines and ancient healing arts that are coming back into modern day life, and they have a system that hasn't really it hasn't changed over the course of many years. And modern medicine is like taking leaps and bounds, but it is constantly changing, and things that they thought were amazing are now being made redundant. So it's pretty incredible. I would love to know, how did you get into Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture?
So my story, if you like, is one that started out actually in Western medicine. And so I trained as an occupational therapist originally, and moved into that Western medicine world, and I worked mostly in neurology, with stroke patients. And whilst I really enjoyed the work, it was never a great fit for me. And as I spent more time in Western medicine, I realised how it's very mechanical and very compartmental. I don't know quite what the right word is. Very reductionist approach. Yes, yes. I can't
it's
say
late for you and it's early for me.
It's late for me. Yes, I've been at work all day.
All good.
And as I sort of got more and more familiar and comfortable in my role within the national health system, it became more and more uncomfortable for me in terms of what I was actually delivering to people, and how I felt like it really wasn't touching the core or the root of them. And I saw people going from one department for their diabetes to another department for their stroke and another department for their heart, and it just felt so wrong and to me, and so I knew it wasn't a good fit. And my introduction to Chinese medicine came when I read an article a while back, a long time ago, which described a lady who had been climbing up K2 and had come into some difficulty, and she developed frostbite in her foot and had gone to the hospitals when she'd managed to come down. And of course, there's nothing you can do for frostbite apart from, wait really. And so she wasn't really willing to wait to see which toes might drop off, and actually started needling herself. And I read this article, which at the end she had managed to return the circulation back in her foot completely. So I just thought that was a bit of a miracle, and I thought, gosh, how can you do that with just by carrying some of these small needles? And I was really fascinated by it. So the seed didn't go away, and eventually, it must have been about 2 or 3 years later, I took the plunge to start my training. And I had 3 small children at the time. I won't say it was easy because it really, really wasn't easy. But I was passionate about it, and the more I went, I loved the learning. I loved the concept. I couldn't get enough of it. So that's where I started.
Oh, there's a couple of things there. The first one was, I remember you telling me that story of how you got into traditional Chinese medicine, and my husband's a mountain guide, and I've heard a few stories of frostbite and people losing things like their fingers and toes or getting frostnip on their face. And yeah, I remember you telling me the story of how this lady climbed K2 and probably could have lost her toes, and then did the needles, got the circulation back, and she managed to save her toes. But there was a few people over at our house, and one of them was a medical doctor, and they were talking about this girl who'd gone out, maybe was not so well prepared for the weather. I don't think it was even in the mountains, but ended up getting frostbite on the toes, and then they all got chopped off. And I was like, oh, I've got to tell you this story about this acupuncturist I met, and recounted the story that you told me. Kind of, I love educating everyone out there. And I think, this is what this podcast is for, because there's lots of fascinating stories. Kind of to go, don't just go and, not that she was the person involved, and I don't know how long a period it was over, but just to maybe think, well, next time I see someone like this, I'm going to suggest they see an acupuncturist to pop some needles in and try a few things before we think we just need to chop the toes off, or that it's all doom and gloom and that you're going to lose your toes. And the response I got made me feel like they probably weren't going to recommend acupuncture. But anyway, so for anyone listening out there, and if you hear of anyone getting frostbite, like, tell them this story.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can't even remember the lady's name. It was so long ago when I read this article, but it just stuck with me. And it makes it now, because of the way I understand how energy works, it makes total sense to me that you could bring that circulation back by stimulating the energy to move into those frozen areas. It just makes sense to me now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been doing a load of interviews this last couple of weeks, and the majority of people that I've been talking to, especially the practitioners who have moved more into this mind-body aspect and delve deeper, they've all talked about the energetics, which, yeah, I want people to know it's not something that's really woo-woo. It happens if you just keep your mind open to it. So we'll get into that. So you got into acupuncture and you had 3 kids. That is quite a feat. I remember studying nothing as major as acupuncture when I had my one daughter, and I found that quite stressful. But yeah, I bet your mind just opened up. Tell us a little bit about what you learned and what you found fascinating.
Okay.
In a few minutes.
How long have you got? Yeah. I think it just made me look at the world in a different way. If I was to sum it up, I think we come into the world and we learn one way, don't we, from our parents, from our family, from our teachers, and the area of the world that we grow up in, the culture we grow up, and we learn certain rules of life within those parameters. And so when I started doing acupuncture, which, you know, I mean, most of my family were just like nonplussed about the whole thing. What on earth do you want to do that for? Why
Well, how
would you
many
give
years
up a
ago?
good job?
How many years ago did you study?
So it was 20 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
When I started that. I was in my 30s, and I've been working in the NHS, you know, the British Health Service, for about 12 years at that point. And of course, you know, and that was what people did. You know, you left school, you studied, you got a good job, and then you stay there until you're 65, and then you get your pension, and
Yeah.
etc. And so yes, you know, my mother was very like, she just couldn't hear it to start with. It took it she just couldn't understand why I would want to give up a job in the NHS to learn something like acupuncture. What is it anyway? Why do you want to stick needles in people? That was that sort of idea. And so when I went to study, and I studied 5-element acupuncture, actually, which is all about the energetics. So it's all about understanding other people's energy and being able to read their energy and fit it into the element. So it just changed my perspective on everything. So it just sort of blew my world, you know, really wide open. And it was I don't know, it's really hard to describe without using you know, extreme words. You know, it was fantastic, it was amazing. and I just loved every moment of it. You know, it even you know, the point location classes, which were very long and very hard to learn, where all the points were. But you know, every acupuncture point has a name and a spirit and a function, and you know, it's incredible the amount of knowledge within that ancient system.
I remember just another brief story, and then I'm really going to hand it over to you. But I remember my first interaction with 5-elements acupuncture, and I don't know if you sort of just pull on parts of that and have delved into a completely different area, but when I first moved to New Zealand and I didn't know what sandflies were, I got bitten by tons of sandflies, and I used to react so badly. And I remember for 3 weeks, every night, I just couldn't sleep because I was so itchy. I started taking antihistamines. I took too many, and I got really drowsy one morning. And I was in tears because I was so tired and I was so itchy on my feet. And I got to work one day and was like, man, I'm so tired. I don't drink coffee, but here I'm going to have a shot of instant coffee. And it just sent me into a spin, and I felt panic and anxiety. And it was the first time I ever had to like cancel on someone who was a new patient who was out in the waiting room. And that's just so not my style. I just never have had to cancel or really be sick from work back in those days. And I went home, and my housemate's girlfriend was a 5-elements acupuncturist, and she said, oh, let me stick some needles in you. Stuck them between my toes. It was not very pleasant. And from that day on, the itching just stopped. It was incredible. It was like the heat just left my body.
Wow.
Yeah. All right.
It's good stuff. Yeah.
I'm sure you've got plenty of stories to share with us. But yeah, let's lead into the next part. How did your journey with acupuncture, Chinese medicine, lead into understanding your own body and what it was going through?
Okay, well, this is, yeah, so there's an interesting journey, isn't there, for us healers, in inverted commas, because you know, we work with other people and we just assume we're going to be okay. So when things start going wrong for us as healers, it's like, oh, I've really got to look at this.
Yeah.
And so you know, I have had lots of hormonal issues and digestive issues over the course of my lifetime. And so when I hit my 40s, I started getting, you know, really heavy bleeding, and I started getting very, very anemic, and I didn't look after myself properly. I just carried on working, and until I actually needed a blood transfusion, because I actually got so weak and so anemic. And to cut a long story short, I ended up with, it turned out I had these really big fibroids, and I ended up having a hysterectomy. And that whole process was extremely difficult for me, because I really felt like I was the person that was supposed to be looking after other people. Not, you know, and I just assumed I would be okay. and so within that whole period of time, and looking at what was going on for me, I realized that I was carrying a whole load of emotional stuff that I had not dealt with. And, you know, I know this is true for so many. You know, I had 3 kids, I was working, I was completely distracted, and I put myself right at the bottom of the pile, as we do. And I think that, and also doing the regression, I was studying regression therapy at the time, was really like the eye-opening moment for me about the depth of the emotional trauma that I had been carrying, that I didn't know I'd been carrying, and that was actually manifesting now in my physical body. And up until that point, I don't think I had really got to grips with understanding that. I knew there was emotional context, but I was just ignoring it, you know. And I came from a family that just didn't talk about emotional things, and you know, emotional intelligence was not a thing in my sort of life history. And when I started to look at how much emotion that I'd been carrying, and how much resentment and how much anger I had repressed, and you know, it's a really big journey to go on, but I'm really grateful for that journey, actually. And it's easy to say that now when you look back. So anybody that's ever going through a really big physical, emotional stuff, and that's listening, you know, you do move and change and come out of the other side of it. And the more you can understand that it's there as a teacher, the further you can go with it, I believe. Instead of being a victim of it, I think. And I think I started out as a victim, as though, why is this happening to me? And grew through that to understand it was, in the old adage, you know, it was happening for me. And it just felt like it had just sent me in another direction, that was even deeper than the one I'd already been on before.
Yeah. Are you able to give a little bit more information about some of the emotional things that you were storing, that you uncovered, so that we can make the links and bring in a bit of your Chinese medicine around fibroids and why do they come about? Because there's a lot of women that have got fibroids.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I would actually sum up fibroids as being pure resentment. And in a nutshell, but it's true, you know. Anger is an energy, which is a moving energy. It has to move up and through and out of you. That's what anger wants to do. It wants to move. When we hold anger in whatever form, frustration, irritability, whatever it is, we're it's like pushing down the strength of a lion into a very small space. And when you keep pushing that amount of energy down and compressing it, that's basically what creates these very, you know, these benign, they're benign tumors at the end of the day within us. Yeah, go on, what you can say.
Do you see fibroids kind of like cysts where it's just like pocketing it away, like that big lion in a little cage, that emotion just stuck in there?
Well, I see it slightly differently. I think, I think there's a subtle difference, put it that way. So fibroids are dense and solid, and obviously they're in the uterus, and there's a lot of resentment there connected with femininity, our sexuality, our repressed creativity, our inability to feel that we're able to open and expand in the world. You know, it's like it's like this this idea of just everything being compressed into a very tight ball. And if you were to ask a lot of people how anger feels within them, they might say it's like a rock. It's the you know, you clench your fist and you clench your muscles when you even think about the anger you feel that you don't let out. It is very tight. Cysts, I see, there is more movement within cysts, if you like. There's this ability for cysts to burst, for example. You know, there's a growing energy that can actually explode. So there is more movement, more yang energy within cysts, and they don't. They're not. The uterus is this is a place where that's just there for receptivity. It's the most yin, the most quiet, the most female organ within us, and it's there to receive and to create.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets compressed in us.
Can you take us through, because like the uterus is also about procreation as well. So was there any link with your fertility history?
I don't believe so, no. And I think this is very interesting, actually, because everything I read about fibroids was, oh, you're struggling with going into menopause and you really want more children, or you want a child, or no, I mean, I had no problem getting pregnant at all, and I've got 3 beautiful children, and I didn't enjoy much being pregnant, but I didn't want any more. It didn't feel like that was the emotional connection for me. I'm not saying that's for everybody, because I think there are a lot of women out there who it can be a fertility issue.
Yeah.
But deeper than that, really, it's about that creativity. It's about stifled creativity and stifled growth and stifled expansion. So if somebody wants to become pregnant and feels that is the way that they can grow in the world, and then for whatever reason can't, they might be holding resentment because they can't, for whatever reason. And that's where I see the link, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I've kind of moved away from, I think it's amazing to shed light. And I have learned so much from your page, because you do shed light on the organs and the areas of the body and what they mean. But just for people to know, it can go so much deeper, because it links in with all the other things that you've got in your body that perhaps you're ignoring and think that is completely normal. So you had the fibroids and you also had digestive issues.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had digestive issues in all sorts of forms. You know, IBS. I had a lot of indigestion, and I'm saying that in inverted commas, because actually it was a crippling indigestion. It would keep me off work. It would double me up. I couldn't move with it.
What was your take on the digestive issues?
Well, I always knew it was related to stress. It was always related to stress. But what, of course, I realise now, it's much deeper. Again, it's much deeper, because it's related to that nervous system trauma, basically. It goes right back to childhood. I mean, in general, I would say that the stomach is like the baby of the organs, and a baby needs to feel safe. And as soon as you don't feel safe, your nervous system kicks into fight and flight and stops digesting, and your you know, the whatever's going on in your stomach just stops. Whether it's digesting or not, then it's just either let's move that out of there, so we're ready to run.
Yeah.
And so that there was a lot of teaching for myself in terms of the digestive issues. As soon as I started to understand that it was connected to the nervous system, and it was connected to stress I was feeling, and again, more repressed emotions that I was pushing down. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah. If you can, we'll go into them in a minute. But now looking back, because you understood that the fibroids were about not being able to express yourself, could you feel that you weren't fully expressing yourself?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, absolutely. I can see that, and what we haven't mentioned here is generational trauma as well. So I was looking back, yeah, I was living a life that I thought I had to live, because that was the way I was brought up, to live a life like this and not express myself in the ways, because it was that I'd been, you know, I can remember my mum saying to me from a very young age, you know, just be quiet, don't show yourself up, you know, don't be loud, don't be silly, don't run around. You know, it was, you know, I didn't know where to move or what to say, because I thought I always felt like I always got it wrong. So I just tried to not do anything.
Stay frozen.
And yet I still seem to upset people, and it was and you know, now I know that that's all to do with my mother's trauma now, but you know, growing up, I had no idea of any of that. I just tried to make myself really small.
Yeah.
And I had to limit my dreams and my the things that I felt that were inside of me. I felt I had to just put a lid on.
Because what made you decide to break through that? Because some people think of creativity as very like practical creativity. I've got to make something, I've got to like draw a piece of art, and they just don't resonate with that. So can you explain creativity to us? And also, because sometimes people will be told something like, oh, fibroids represent emotions around your inability to express your creativity, your emotions, trust your intuition, all that feminine energy. And they're like, I can hear the words you're saying, but just can't make sense of it. So you could make sense of it at that time. But can you, for people listening, just share with us what creativity meant to you? And how have you gone on to express that?
So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's linked to life and living. Okay, here's how I would try and describe it. We're designed to grow. We're designed to grow and expand. We are everything is about movement. So whenever you look at the earth, everything moves within the earth and everything grows. And creativity for me is about that growth in whatever way that means for anybody. So it's the freedom to expand yourself and it's like this, following this heart, it's following your authentic self. So creativity is not just about art, if you like, or writing or drawing. It's about following a train of thought sometimes, a bit like when you're falling asleep at night and your mind can just drift on some strange roller coaster way and you end up at some point you think, oh, I wonder how I got to that idea or that thought or that picture in my mind. That's creativity. It's like, for me, that's just about following this natural ability of your energy to grow and move.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I think of it a bit like a tree. If you leave a tree to grow, it will grow in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways, perhaps, but it will only grow, it will only expand. But if that growth is limited, it will become stunted and knotty, and the energy will not flow through it in such a free way. And that's, so for me, creativity is synonymous with growth and expansion.
Beautifully said. So you were talking a little bit about all sorts of other emotions that were inside of you as well. Can you go into them and maybe talk a little bit more about the generational trauma, if there's more to that? You had resentment with the fibroids. What else do you recall?
Well, I was a very angry teenager, and I didn't understand why. And that anger, as I got older, as I learned to contain the anger, it just turned into resentment as I held it inside. So that's that in a nutshell. What I didn't know or understand about myself was why I was so angry. I had no idea why I was angry. I just thought there was something wrong with me. And it's only really as I've understood and got to grips with relational trauma that I have really understood where the anger came from. So relational trauma is really that disconnection from self that happens to many, many children as then they're unable to express themselves or grow, or their emotions aren't held by their family or by by their mother in particular. But parents, if they can't hold the emotion of that child, then that child assumes there's something wrong with them. If a child gets told off for being angry, they assume that there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with being angry, with something wrong with anger within them. But it doesn't stop them feeling it. But they don't know how to express it in a way that is healthy. So I just followed, we just mirror our parents. So my mum couldn't express any healthy anger, but I knew she was an angry person. And
you could feel the anger energy in her.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, you don't need, sometimes it doesn't need to be said. Well, most of the time it doesn't need to be said. You just feel it. And when you're a sensitive child, which of course I didn't know that I was, but it, I think we're all sensitive children actually. But you know how that you might not have a name for it, but you know that energy, and you know what it is, and you know what it does. So you withdraw from it, don't you? You withdraw from that anger. But we also mirror them. I've got no other model to learn from apart from my parents. So I copy the way they handle things. And so I just expressed all the anger that my mother wasn't expressing, especially as I got older. And I believe that's what children do, is they're often expressing the things that are just held inside of the parents. So
yeah. So how did you express your anger then?
When I was that sort of age. So when I was younger, there was a lot of tantruming, a lot of screaming and shouting. But then as I got into teenage years, I was like a wild child for a while. I was partying, I was drinking, I was just doing really, all that just really wild stuff. I was trying to break every rule there probably was to break. And even though I felt that energy inside me, it still didn't feel quite right. I was just I was in a very unhappy place as a teenager. And I felt the weight of expectation on me, as in of how I should behave.
And so how did you learn to express your anger as you began to understand that it was held inside of your body?
So writing mostly was my way out, but a lot of it actually started to dissipate as I understood myself more, as I was able to question. You know, it naturally left me when I stopped feeling the rage of other people, and when I stopped blaming and I took responsibility for actually what was going on inside of me. You know, a lot of the anger left, but writing was and still is, my go-to way of
Is it angry
expressing.
writing?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, and it has been, and it's not so much now. Actually, now I think it's more creative what I write.
Mm.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I would have sheets of paper, and it would be swearing, and it would be scribbling, and it would be like, yeah, it was fury and rage that I'd throw on that.
Yeah, right.
On paper. Yeah. So, and then sometimes when I'd look back at it, because usually I just wouldn't look at it ever again. But sometimes when I look back at it and go, wow,
Yeah.
there's a lot of energy on that. It's like, whoa. And then you start reading it through and you think, actually, no, I don't feel like that anymore, because once it's out of your body and onto the page, it's, you know, you have left some of it behind, and
Yeah.
I can reflect more easily on it.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I see the benefits of going into past situations. Like, I take people into the past and process the emotions, but then we don't have to sit there and wallow in it and revisit it all the time. And then there are some people who are just so resistant to go into the past and just want to keep on moving forwards. But I think there are just such important events in our life that shape us, and the emotional traumas that we experience, that they do have lessons and insights for us if we allow it, and we can go back and revisit and see how we can move forwards from that.
Yeah, I totally agree. But timing is everything, and you can only do it when you can do it. I think, you know, and you can only meet somebody at that place that they're at that moment as well. But yes, I mean, you know, we have that. What's happened in the past creates what we are right now, and also anger that comes up now is never about now, it's always about the past.
Yeah. Oh, that's
It's
well
all,
said.
yeah, it's always working through a belief system, because if we didn't believe what somebody said to us, then we wouldn't even be triggered.
Yeah. Yes, every time we're triggered, it's an opportunity to look into it, because, yeah, why would we react or want to respond otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. And Eckhart Tolle said, you know, behind the anger there's always pain. And anger is basically a defense. It's a defense mechanism. It's there to protect us and create a boundary. But most of us, we haven't really, we you know, in our society, when I say most of us, I mean our society and our culture doesn't do anger well.
No.
There isn't. It's like there's no healthy anger modeled to us.
Yeah.
There was something on Facebook I saw, which was so beautiful. I don't know if you ever seen it. And it was a father with a 2-year-old child having a tantrum, and the dad was just sitting there while this child was just in fury, and he was just holding the space for that anger,
Yeah.
allowing it to be there, not getting angry alongside, just allowing the anger to be there. And it was so beautiful. And I thought, this is something that, you know, we don't do well in our culture, and it's so lovely to see that, because that's so the way forward, to be able to help children release that energy in a healthy way, holding the space for them.
Yeah.
And it's a much more, and then it starts to fit into their nervous system in such a way that they can use the anger when it's necessary, and then not when it's not, you know.
Yeah. I use the kids and tantrum example all the time, because kids don't have those necessarily like the social boundaries or awareness to really care what other people think. They just know and they feel it and they know it's got to come out of them. But some parents get so embarrassed because their child's got a tantrum. And I think it's not until you have your own child you can have empathy for another parent whose child's having a tantrum in the supermarket. I was on holidays in Australia recently, and I really felt for these parents. They had a little toddler and they had a baby that was really just screaming. I mean, I didn't feel anything, but I was around the corner from the car park, and this older couple were just like, gosh, what are they doing to that child? And they were out of earshot. And then I walked past, and there was a younger couple, which I'm pretty sure didn't have kids. And the guy said quite loudly, oh my gosh, what's going on there? But just with this tone, and the mum heard it, and I really felt for her in that moment. Like, nothing for the child, because the baby, because I'm like, they're just letting it out. But that's what society does, and it's kind of like bullying. Those words stick, and that, I hope that didn't stick with the mum. But there's a lack of understanding there. And maybe when they have their own children and it's having a tantrum in the car park, they will, hopefully, remember that time that they criticized and judged that poor family with the crying baby, and that baby just needs to get it out.
Yeah, and that judgment is just a product of the society that we live in, isn't it? Because that's the way, that's the way our parents brought us up to an extent, and their parents before that. It was, children should be seen and not heard. That sort of mentality, and a lot of judgment placed on women, especially if they didn't control, in inverted commas, their children.
Yeah.
And there's so much oppression in that, that it's it's very difficult. I had a similar, I can remember my son having this tantrum, I mean, a mega tantrum in a not a supermarket, it was a department store actually, and he was screaming the place, and so much so that I had to, I wanted to leave. And I just remember being so embarrassed by it, and I was, and then all I'm doing is projecting my embarrassment, my fear, my trauma, which was don't be seen, don't be heard or seen, really. That was my upbringing. It's like everybody's looking at us, and I'm projecting that onto my son. And if I had my time again, but
He might have to go through tantrum therapy.
Yes, exactly. So but I apologize to him frequently for that. He can't remember.
Well, it's funny, I just I get glimpses of images, and like, every time I feel like I'm working with people, it's like they go back to being a child. And we're doing a lot of inner child, younger self work. It's that aspect of healing, isn't it? So I really see the child in the adults.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I see that all the time. And it's little phrases that come up sometimes, isn't it? And that you can really see that. And that's the idea, isn't it? In terms of the work that we're doing, is let's work with that inner child. We'll work with that that child who hasn't been heard, who wants to speak, and wants their authentic voice to come out. It's like working with that part of them.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
I love it. Yeah.
Just one more part around your experience and understanding is, did you make any other big changes in your life after the hysterectomy?
Yes, everything happened at once, really, because I lost my dad. I had the hysterectomy, and then I made a massive shift, which was to end my 27-year-old marriage. And I just felt like I could not grow anymore within the confines of that relationship. And it was a massive decision to make. And and really, really hard. It's really hard to do that when you've got children, and it's taken me really up until probably this year, if I'm completely honest, to really understand myself well enough to know why I needed to do that as well. But yes, that was all big part of it, because at the end of the day we keep repeating trauma in our lives, and and my husband was just another version of my father, I think, really. And when you start breaking it down, and there's a lot of energetic dynamics that go on within relationships that are repeats of trauma that we've had as children, and all sorts of things going on.
Yeah.
So yes, I that's too big a subject to even sort of to talk about today, but there's a lot of these energetic dynamics and patterns that I'm really fascinated with, that keep coming up in your life. But yeah, that was a huge decision, and that felt like a one big ending, but also a beginning of something new for me, because I've been able to slowly grow into the person that I'm now, and I'm becoming.
Yeah.
As I, to really expand my vision of myself. So yeah.
Are you able to share that vision with us?
Well, yeah, okay. So even as a child, I saw myself as probably as a writer. And so now at this point, obviously I've been writing the Instagram. I have a great desire to write. I have about 3 books in my head that I want to write about. This mind-body connection that we're talking about, the root cause of illness and disease, which is of course my course. So yes, I've got these books in my head which I want to write, and I'm stepping into the teacher of version of me, which I'm aware has always been there, but is starting to really come out and blossom.
Yeah.
Now.
And your Instagram posts, we'll share those details a little bit later. They're just so beautifully written. They are long posts, and yeah, they just make so much sense. And you interweave the energetics and the Chinese medicine and just the practicalities. And I'm sure so many people just find your page, go, oh, I've got that, I've got this issue with this organ, and have a read about it. But it creates this awareness around, oh my gosh, I might be storing this in my body. So can you tell us a little bit about how your work has evolved? Like, do you still use the 5 elements acupuncture? Or do you feel like you've just really brought things in from your own experiences and seeing many clients over the years?
It's a combination of everything, and people often say, oh, where are you getting your information from? And that's a really hard question to answer sometimes, and I'm sure you probably find the same thing, because when you see a lot of people one-to-one, like you do too, when you're sort of open to this idea that there's something deeper going on, you can't help but, I don't know, ask the questions. And then as you ask the questions, you start seeing the patterns, and you start seeing these dots join up and making these connections. And so there's a natural process of self-discovery in all of that, as well as that, yes, the 5 elements and the richness that Chinese medicine brings to the table energetically. And then of course the sort of the dimensional work that I did with the past lives, and which
we haven't even got into your knowledge about past lives.
No, that's a whole other.
Keep going. We might have to get you on another time.
There's a whole, there's just layer upon layer upon layer, and so I don't know. I draw them together, and as I write these posts, they do get longer and longer. But I see so many. There's such richness and depth, and even when I've written a post, it's like, oh, there's so many other things I could write.
Yeah. I know, and Instagram really gives you a limit, don't they?
They really do. So, but it's probably just as well. Otherwise, I just might go on forever. But, yeah.
I know you said that energetics is a really big topic, but is there like a case that you can share with us to really just show, yeah, the play that energetics has in the process of self-discovery and shifting trauma and emotions?
Oh, right. Let me just see what comes up in my. Well, as you've asked the question, one thing that pops into my mind is a lady who was diagnosed with Parkinson's that I've seen quite recently. And so I'm just trying to sort of give an overview here of all the emotional stuff as well. So in Parkinson's, we've got movement, haven't we? There's a shakiness to Parkinson's. And it's such a big disease, if you like, and it's why would anybody manifest that within their body? And so in terms of questioning her and looking back, we went back to childhood, and we looked at childhood, and we went back to a point where she remembered really clearly, where she was standing in the garden and she was watching her mother, who was in the kitchen, and her mother was crying. Her mother was weeping with, tears coming down her face, because her mother, my client's grandmother, had literally just passed away. But my client, looking at her mother in that, through the window at that point, was made some sort of decision or pact with herself that she never wanted anybody to suffer. It hurt her so much to see her mother crying that she didn't want anyone else to suffer. And she said that was a turning point for her. And from that moment on, her life changed in as much that she became very anxious, and she became the caretaker for everybody around her. So she took on everybody's emotions, and she took responsibility for her own mother and for everybody she came into contact with. And in drawing those emotions to her and being the person that she was, very kind, very soft, but also always on the lookout for danger or something that she could fix, she absorbed so much of other people's emotions. She, rather than them feel it, she wanted to feel it. And she spent a lifetime doing this. And so when she comes into my clinic, and she's probably in her late 50s, having been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and also having just lost her own mother, there was this moment inside her where she sort of recognized this turning point, and recognized everything that she'd been carrying for all of that time. But holding all those emotions is actually what had given her the Parkinson's in essence. She'd been absorbing so much from everyone else that it's like she was a container for everybody else's energy. And she literally, she had grown, she carried a lot of weight, she was heavy with everybody else's emotions. And that's, I don't know if that sums up what you were talking, how you wanted me to sum something up, but there, yeah. It's like literally she's just full of everybody else's stuff.
Yeah. And so what would your plan be to take her through to help her just let go of everyone's emotions that are stored in her body as the Parkinson's and as the weight? What would you see as the plan?
So it's a process, and it's a process of her and helping facilitate her understanding that she no longer needs to hold everybody else's emotions. So it's a process of encouraging and giving attention and space for her own emotions. How do you feel? Let's find yourself underneath all these layers, and how do you really feel, and what's happening in your body, and where are those things stored, and put your hand, so there's a lot of layers of work on that. And energetically, I'll be working with the needles, and I'll be also getting her to tune into her own body. And I'll also be asking her to see if she can connect with what's going on for her, and let's give it space. And mostly it's crying. To be fair, mostly it's allowing giving her a space where she can release the energy, because she's never released it, basically.
And it might still be early days, but I'm curious, are you already noticing a shift? Is she recognizing a change in her tremors or how she's feeling?
Well, to be honest, she's only had 2 treatments, so it's still very early days. But yeah, she definitely feels, there's been definitely a shift in her understanding.
Yeah.
But healing journeys, they're up and down, aren't they? They're a marathon, not a sprint. Certainly in my world, and it's a question of layers. And you can only go as fast as that person is able to go, and you go so far, you sometimes hit resistance, and then there's another layer to uncover. But really, for me, it's all about giving the space and for someone to be able to do that.
So what is the new work you're doing in the online space? Because you've been sharing for a good couple of years. Actually, maybe is a good time. Can you share what is your Instagram handle so that people can troll through your website, your Instagram page, and find out all the things they're carrying?
Thank you. So yes, it's at the healing point, with a dot and a dash at the end. So
that always really catches me.
Tracey Stevens, at the healing point. You should find it, I think. So thank you for that. No, I've just come to the end of a trial course that I very tentatively started and at the beginning, and now I'm like, yes, I like this.
So good. What was it on?
And this is for practitioners. So this is a practitioner course for developing a root cause practice. So we cover almost everything we've talked about today. We cover the understanding of how illness is created in the body, so the energetics of that. And I take people through a process of learning the skills of questioning their clients, to create that safe space to enable them to start getting to those light bulb moments for themselves. Because I think when people can really understand, oh, that's why I've got this knee pain. Yeah, oh, that makes sense now. There's such an empowerment to that. And, because people, we're always giving our power away to, doctors and medics and tablets. And, if somebody understands that they're going through a change and that's why their knee hurts, and they can talk about that change and their fears about it, and then all of a sudden that will unlock their body. That's such a beautiful thing to be able to do within a practice. So so that is my developing a root cause practice course. It's a 12-week course. It's very intense. There's a lot of personal work in it as well, and I will be repeating that in September. So I'm working on how to on the format of that, so I'm building more into it in the September course.
Cool. Because I know a lot of the practitioners that go through my training, I get them onto your page and divulging it just in another way. So a lot of people there are following you and they might want to do your course. So if people do want to jump on board that, do they just message you on Instagram?
So there's a link in my bio on Instagram to a waiting list. At the moment, I haven't released the dates. I'm still working up to that. So in August, we'll start releasing the dates, and I'll be probably doing, interviewing people who want to come on the course, as in like an application procedure really as well, just to make sure we get the right people, because it's quite intensive, to be fair.
And I love that you also make them that it's like it involves the personal work as well, because I think, you know, there are so many courses out there that people think I'm just going to consume information, but that's the cool thing about these courses, right, is that they get to discover more about themselves and they get to share with one another the changes that they go through. What was your experience running that first course?
Oh, I mean, I've absolutely loved it, to be honest. And it's I was obviously, it was really nerve-wracking to start with for me, but um I think I've just grown in confidence in terms of, oh yeah, I know what I'm talking about. You're never really quite sure until you start teaching. But yeah, I've just seen the people on my course be able to grow their own practice and gain so much more understanding, like you say, for themselves. And I just want to do more of that now. I'm looking to develop that. And some of the people that have already been through the first cohort want to stay on as mentors into the next. So yeah, so I'm working how we do that as well. So there's lots. Yeah, so there's lots going on. Yeah, so I think I'm going to be doing less one-to-one acupuncture and more teaching as time goes forward. So
Yeah, because you're also running some mini workshops. Is that just for practitioners or is that open to anyone?
Oh no, that's for anybody, can come to those. Yeah, I just wanted to do these mini courses because I just think it's really useful for people, and if people are interested, these are mostly Chinese medicine with the emotional anatomy thrown in, and they're literally an hour and a half at most, and I'm covering all the main meridians and organs to start with, and then I don't know, after that I'll just see, you know, I've got lots of ideas in terms of what we can do in terms of mini workshops, but they're sort of bite-sized. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So yes, it's all happening.
Amazing. Do you have a website?
I do. It's my name, so it's www.traceystevens.org.
Okay, we'll pop that in the podcast notes. Is there anything else that you want to share with us today?
Well, I think we've covered a lot. So no, I think that's probably enough for people to absorb right now. But maybe we should meet again, Jin. That'll be good.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I just love following everyone's journey that comes on here. And I know that, yeah, you started yours many years ago, but it's kind of evolving again now. So good luck.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I really appreciate your asking me to do the podcast, and really appreciate being here. So it's great to talk to you again.
Thank you.